All right, now before we can talk about food chains, we need to learn about energy. All things need energy to stay alive. They get that energy from food, like hot dogs and hamburgers and things like that. Now, plants are called producers. Producers are called that because they make their own food. They produce their own food in what's called photosynthesis. Energy flows down from the sun to the producers to help them make energy. All food chains and food webs start with the energy from the sun. Now make sure that you're paying attention to those key words that are highlighted in red for your notes. All animals are called consumers. So consumers are living things that eat other living things. Some animals eat plants, and some animals eat other animals that eat plants. Energy flows from the sun to the producer and then to the consumers. Can anyone think of an example of this? An example would be something like a cow. A cow eats the grass, which is a producer, and we eat the cow. So the cow is a consumer, and so are we. Predator versus prey. Now, a predator is an animal that hunts other animals for food, whereas a prey is an animal that is hunted for food by another animal. So a rabbit would be considered both a consumer because it eats the grass, and a prey because the fox eats the rabbit. So then that makes the fox both a consumer and a predator. This shows how energy flows from the prey to a predator. So as we eat, we're gaining energy. Rabbits get it from the grass gets it from the sun. It's flowing from one to the next. Now, a food chain shows the path of food energy. So as I mentioned, the sun gives the energy to the plant gives the energy to the rabbit, and the rabbit gives the energy to the fox. So that's the food chain. That's a path of energy in the ecosystem. A food chain begins with the producers, like the plants, and then consumers are also part of that chain, as we mentioned. Now there are 3 different kinds of consumers. The kinds of consumers are herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Now an herbivore is an animal that eats only plants. They get their energy from just eating plants. Some examples would be rabbits, cows, sheep, anything like that. A carnivore is an animal that eats only other animals, so they eat meat. So carnivores get their energy from eating other animals. Examples of a carnivore would be lions and tigers and bears. An omnivore is an animal that eats both plants and animals. Omnivores get their energy from eating plants and animals. Examples of that would be bears. Did you know that bears eat fruit and meat? Another example is the frog, or even you, because you eat both fruit and vegetables and meat. So the food chain here shows grass is the producer. It's eaten by the grasshopper, who's a consumer, an herbivore, and prey. The grasshopper is then eaten by the frog, who's a consumer and an carnivore. Then the snake eats the frog, making him a consumer and a carnivore, and the hawk eats the snake. The hawk is a consumer, carnivore, and a predator. Now, food webs are just bigger food chains. So plants and animals in an ecosystem are part of more than one food chain. A food web shows how one plant or animal is part of another food chain. So a food web is 2 or more chains that overlap. Now, scavengers are animals that eat the remains or wastes of other animals. Scavengers are consumers that get their energy from eating the remains of things that were once alive. Scavengers are a super important part of the ecosystem because they take care of the things that are no longer alive. When an organism dies, so when an animal or plant dies, their bodies decay and break down into simpler parts. A decomposer is a living thing that breaks down the remains of dead organisms, so that those organisms can then turn into things that can grow again. Food chains end with decomposers. Some examples are fungi, like mushrooms, or bacteria. So decomposers help the environment by recycling valuable energy that other organisms used to grow. Decomposers are important to the ecosystem because they release energy that plants and animals need to stay alive. Decomposers clean up dead organisms so other things can live where dead organisms once were. All right.